Bear with me because I'm not going to say I'm anti-gym technology, but maybe they should have found somebody who's a little less thorough and wasn't going to just try to break their machine and max it out all the time. So today we're reviewing and abusing the Speediance Gym Monster, which you might have already heard of before because they raised over $550,000 on Kickstarter. It's a smart home gym package much like a tonal, but without the proven track record. So can this newcomer compete, or is all this smart home gym crap, well, exactly that? And I'm going to be honest with you, I've had my share of successes and wild failures with this thing, and I've never been one to shy away from sharing my opinion, so let's get into it. Listen, for someone like me, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I don't mean some jacked, handsome influencer with more sex appeal than they know what to do with. I mean the type of person who spends more money on their home gym than they do their home. But I've got enough space here to create a full home gym, and I've sold my free time, body, and personality on the internet to be able to afford it. But I have a best friend who lives in New York City, and she doesn't have the space for plates, dumbbells, benches, and some of those other small essentials you need to create a small home gym. But maybe something like this, where it folds into a tiny footprint at 27 inches wide and 15 inches deep, and even folded out, it's only 4 feet long. Though you do need space around it to work out. Well, this, at least for her, is a viable option, and she'll never outgrow the maximum resistance of those 2 direct drive motors at 220 pounds combined. For her, this is as close as she'll ever get to a complete home gym, and in my opinion, that's the target audience of a product like this. So what does it do? Well, much like a tonal or any other smart home gym technology, it attempts to emulate an entire home gym into a small package, which, as we'll see with that approach, there's often pros and cons, which we'll cover with oftentimes some hilarious consequences.
Oh my.
And like in our last video, no one thing can do everything well, but if you don't have a lot of space, something like this can be a great option, and it does offer an impressive amount of movements, which as of this filming was 134 last time I counted, covering everything from body weight and stretches to barbell and cable work. And as we'll cover, some were great and some I didn't really enjoy. But it's an impressive list this early into development, and I never actually turned the damn thing on. I should probably do that. The pre-recorded videos also give you audio tips as they demonstrate the movement, and they're updating it constantly and adding more exercises all the time. And I went through a ton of them. I spent hours going exercise by exercise to find out what worked well. And a lot of them really did, but some of them were, well, to call them disasters might be a bit of an understatement. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. When I first got this thing, I would 100% in no way recommend it to anyone. But then a funny thing happened. It turns out if you read the directions, which aren't particularly complicated, it does work pretty well most of the time. And I should also note that mine is actually a sample production unit. One of the first ever produced, so many of the problems I had you won't ever see. So that wide squat we just witnessed is already gone. These guys update a lot, and in many ways that was the most difficult part of making this video. I'd find an issue one day and it would be fixed the next. So as much as I thought I could just make a montage fail video featuring this thing, those bastards ruined it with their hard work and dedication. And that's where I found Speediance to excel. They communicate better than any I've worked with. They really seem to care and are deeply invested in this, which shows because this thing is evolving incredibly quickly from when I was sent it months ago to now. So the real question is, does this provide enough content, and is it effective enough to warrant that price? Because this type of technology isn't cheap. You're essentially buying a smart functional trainer. And while I think this type of equipment often tries to do too much, that doesn't mean it doesn't do a lot well. So let's talk about what it currently offers as well as what they're adding before we go into specific exercises. There's a lot to choose from. Specific movements, as I mentioned before, you can just free train if you want and do your own thing. You can choose between different workouts to have some variety with things like your typical arms, back, legs. But they've also got 5x5, posterior chain stuff, frontier chain, I think they mean anterior chain. Really, it's a decent collection for it being so early on, and they're adding a lot more content. They actually just filmed a bunch of new workouts featuring new trainers, so it can be a little bit confusing as to what to pick at first.
Beefy arm, bubble butt workout.
But they've also got programs you can select that will bring you through weeks worth of workouts. At this point, it's a bit of what you'd expect. 3-day on, 1-off circuit training, upper lower splits, full body, stuff where they take workouts and program them into a schedule. Overall, the workouts are challenging, but they can feel a little bit lazy. But I think that's just because they were trying to create enough content at first to keep people interested, and I'm sure they'll add more variety as time goes on. The first one I selected, the big beefy arm. Look at that tan line. It brought me through a series of bicep and tricep exercises, but with everything being 4 sets of 10, it wasn't particularly exciting, even if it did result in a pretty decent workout. It did miscount a few times on tricep rope overhead extensions, which isn't something I noticed on other workouts or exercises, but I haven't been able to go through every single workout and program, which means I missed out on everybody's favorite exclusive ski mode. And I admit, I did giggle a few times at some of the silly workout names like Say Goodbye to Your Jiggly Arm and Bubble Butt Workout. And let's be honest, they probably should have had Winnie pose for that thumbnail because that woman has never even seen cake. The workouts themselves set the weight based on your strength assessments, but they can be adjusted at any point in time. Well, that is, as long as you can reach the screen or the controller, which can be an issue at times. And that's not a knock against Speediance. Tonal and others have this same issue, but we'll get to that in a bit. The strength assessments, in my opinion, are a lot of fun. You pick an exercise like bench, squat, barbell row, you get the idea, and then you start at a really low weight, and after you complete 3 reps, it adds a few pounds, and you keep going until you can't go anymore. Well, of course, you can stop at any point in time. And if it sounds a bit unsafe and like an injury waiting to happen, it probably is. So naturally, I did a bunch of them, but the most important one was the barbell curl. I like to call this the death gauntlet. And if you're saying to yourself, this is for responsible adults, you're probably right, but you'd probably also be right there with me. I don't really love the barbell controller because if you're pushing or pulling any type of weight, it's really difficult to move your thumb over to press the button to stop the resistance. And I know you could argue this type of equipment isn't made for somebody like me, but I also have enough experience to know what I'm doing. And while I appreciate Speediance's attempt to do more with their equipment, there's a reason Tonal doesn't want you doing barbell squats with theirs. Put some weight on that bar and then go try to push that button. And in my opinion, the controller needs to be redesigned and the start-stop button made larger and emphasized more, because I've had times where I'm trying to stop the resistance and I'm increasing the weight instead. Which is a good example of a current limitation with this type of equipment. And to be honest, Speediance could very well just remove that movement and then just keep the handle variation without losing any real functionality. But for all I know, Speediance will have already done that by the time this video comes out. You can set targets for things like volume, calories, time, and other metrics, and then go back and check on your progress and accomplishments, or even make your own workout templates, which is really cool because you're not limited to what they offer. There's a few ways to buy this thing, with prices ranging from about $2,700 to $3,500 plus shipping, depending on the package you choose, but I'd avoid the base version as it doesn't include the smart controllers, which allow you to turn on and off the resistance with your hands, which is a big part of the appeal of this thing. I've got the smart accessory package, which is where those Bluetooth accessories and a few other things get added on. There's no subscription fees in 2022, but it'll be $29 a month after that, and an account can have up to 5 family members on it. The machine itself is pretty well polished. It's incredibly quiet and stable with a large clear display that tilts. And they even reinforced the uprights from the sample version, which at one point I actually tried to snap in half. Which might not have been my smartest move, but luckily I failed this time. So it's nice to see they've improved some things with this one. They've tweaked the motors to make the movement smoother, which is honestly my biggest complaint about this thing, but it applies to smart home gyms in general. Go ahead and look up Tonal videos and you'll see the same thing. As you add weight, the resistance can become jerky, and I prefer a more natural feeling stroke, and then that barbell becomes difficult to balance, and that's a product of that cable resistance and how compact and light that bar is. You could of course argue that that instability forces you to train those auxiliary muscles, and we use all types of barbell exercises with bands and other tools to purposely introduce that into our movements. But I'm going to argue that's not really the idea here, and I'm talking about with all smart home gym companies. Now, this does mostly apply when you're doing a barbell exercise because you're creating a direct connection between those two motors, which is where you might feel a difference in resistance. And I should mention, this is really only noticeable as you start pushing that weight into the 150 pound or so range, so for much of the target audience of this thing, it may never be an issue. And as I've said, they've already tweaked those motors, but I can only speak to what I've got in front of me. Setting up a machine is easy, there's no installation required, the platform's a little small, but that's gotta be a tough balancing act for them, but folding up and out that platform is super simple, it's just 2 levers and a button. And once you're used to moving the clips around between the attachment points, it's pretty quick to set up and use. Navigating the menus is easy with this clean looking UI, and you can filter by different types of things, so actually finding and getting into your workouts takes no time at all, but I really find the accessories to be lacking. The bench feels like an Amazon Basics or Marcy flat bench. The cuffs could be beefed up some, and the tricep rope is your basic Amazon budget level thing. The barbell I really don't like on this thing. It's too light, the knurling is way too passive, and it's not cleanly done. But just yesterday they sent me a picture of the new barbell that all the actual customers get, and it looks like it's addressed a lot of those issues. And if this review has been a bit of a roller coaster so far, well, this might be where it really takes off, because for every exercise I really liked on this thing, which in general is exercises using these handles, because in many ways it works better than a functional trainer. And that's because you can push the button on the handle to remove the resistance so you can get into position and then push it again to engage it rather than awkwardly getting in and out of position with it already loaded. But then there are other exercises where this machine just doesn't work. And some of that I've addressed already, like where it's a heavy exercise like a deadlift or a squat, where that inconsistent resistance and lack of knurling can really show up. But sex humpies, or whatever they're called, worked excellently even if I'm not used to being on my knees. Seriously, I created pages of notes as I went through movement after movement. And sometimes I'd love the result and sometimes it just didn't work, but we could do this back and forth all day. Maybe I'm being too harsh on this thing and they'll remove and tweak some things and a new user would have had no idea. It really does have some cool features, like the ability to change the resistance. You can simulate chains, add resistance on the eccentric portion of a lift, turn the spotter on so it helps you as you fatigue, and that really is my problem with this damn thing. It's got so much potential that every time I want to hate it, I find something that I really like about it. Cable curls, reverse flies, and most other things you do on a typical functional trainer work really well on this thing. So when it comes down to a recommendation, I'd say you really have to evaluate what you're going to do with something like this. For somebody like me, it really doesn't make any sense, but for a lot of people out there, these things might be really cool. If you enjoyed this video, check out this video on another product that also does a ton of stuff. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe to help support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.